Welcome, and thank you for standing by for the FirstNet Financial Committee and Board meeting. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All parties will be on a listen-only mode for today's call. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, Operator, and welcome everybody to the FirstNet Committee and Board meetings on today, August the 26th. Today we're going to review the material for the FY17 budget and a bit of work which we will review later. We will also take care of some administrative things in terms of minutes from the last board meeting, but I'm very pleased that we're able to have this meeting in August, in advance of the end of the fiscal year, in advance of what is going to be another momentous year for FirstNet, I expect. So I also want to take the opportunity to congratulate the reappointed board members, Chief Johnson, who is not with us today, but obviously is the vice chair of the FirstNet board. So we're excited to have him back. Terry Takai. Terry, you're on with us today, and I really appreciate your willingness to serve another term. You've been with us since the inaugural board, and your experience is valued, and appreciate you committing the time to be with us another term. And Barry, I know you are not seeking reappointment, but we appreciate you continuing to serve as we look to fill your position. So thank you everybody for willing to do this. This is an important effort for the country, and your involvement and contributions are invaluable. So thanks for that.
We can't ignore the other reappointment, and I know on behalf of your colleagues, I want to thank you for anteing up once again, not only on the board but as our fearless leader. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's an honor. As I've told you before, it's an honor to serve, not only as chair of the board, but to serve public safety, which is, as you know, the focus of this whole effort. So I appreciate that. Let's move on to roll call, Karen, if we could, for today's meetings.
Yes. Sue Spencer.
Here.
Jeff Johnson. Gary Boniface.
Here.
Ed Horwitz.
Here.
Chris Burbank. James Douglas.
Here.
Kevin McGinnis.
Here.
Anise Parker.
Here.
Neil Cox.
Here.
Ed Reynolds. Richard Stanek.
Here.
Terry Takai.
Here.
Dave Mader. Suzanne Spalding. Amy Heck. Madam Chair, we have a quorum both for the board and for the four committees of governance, technology, consultation, and finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. And I think we now need to move on to our traditional conflicts notification, obviously significant in light of where we are in the procurement process.
Yes, and I will read that. In advance of the committee and board meetings, the management team has provided the board with an agenda outlining each of the items that will be discussed and decided during this combined committee and board meeting. The members were also provided with a conflicts of interest assessment, which was produced jointly by the Commerce Department Office of General Counsel and FirstNet's Office of Chiefs Counsel. Providing these documents in advance to the board members allows them to identify potential conflicts of interest and to recuse themselves from participation, if required. We will, prior to these committee meetings and the full board meeting, remind all board members of their obligations relating to the conflicts of interest and ask them to identify whether any recusals from deliberations or voting are necessary. In consideration, the meeting today, each member should consider his or her obligation with respect to appropriate committee, and for some of you, that might mean both. This conflict statement is intended to cover all actions and discussions during this combined committee meeting session. With that said, if any board member believes that they now must recuse themselves from either or both meetings, please so state for the record. Madam Chair, seeing none, we may proceed.
Great, thank you, Karen. And I think we're going to now proceed with the chair of our Finance Committee, Jim Douglas. And Jim, I think you have some significant work to do here today on the Finance Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We certainly do, and I appreciate the availability of our colleagues to consider a couple of resolutions, principally on the budget for fiscal year 2017, which begins on the 1st of October. The budget that we'll look at in just a minute totals $6.585 billion. That's a larger number than we've been accustomed to over the last few years, but it, of course, includes $6.5 billion for the network contract award and task orders. The amount for our operations is the balance of just under $85 million. The budget formulation process this year was great in my view. It was streamlined. It began in March. Mike and Kim gave some guidance to all of the entities within the authority to develop a consistent approach to the budget, to encourage collaboration across the various functional units, and importantly, the budget is developed in alignment with our strategic goals and objectives that we've talked about a number of times in the past and are laid out in our 5-year plan. So this is a good process in my view. It ensures that the resources are going to be used to support our overall mission, and in a minute or two, as I suggested, we'll consider the resolutions to implement them. But I want to turn it over to Mike, first of all, for his comments. And Mike, again, we appreciate your and Kim's leadership on the budget process this year and on a budget that's so well presented.
Great. Thank you, Governor Douglas. Kim Farrington, our FirstNet CFO, will walk you all through the presentation in just a moment. Please, as the Finance Committee, or in fact the entire board, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to stop, and certainly good clarification. This FY17 budget reflects for us a complete pivot from the RFP prep, evaluation, and outreach to operationalizing the partnership that we've all envisioned and is needed, the partnerships with our state and local partners and with industry. So as you'll hear Kim present, we believe and know that this is a good, solid, strong budget to put FirstNet in a successful position. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim to give you some of the highlights.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, board members. We're going to be talking about the fiscal year 2017 budget, but before we actually dive into this current year's budget, I want to take you back in time a year ago to August of 2015, when the board actually approved the fiscal year 2016 budget, which totaled $126 million in obligations. Looking at fiscal year 16 and how we're doing, we currently have utilized close to $67 million through July. We anticipate utilizing about $108 million of our obligations budget, which equates to about 86%. From an expense perspective, we have utilized over $58 million of our fiscal year 2016 expenses. We anticipate utilizing about 78% by fiscal year end. The one item to keep in mind with regard to expenses is that these expenses will be carried over into fiscal year 2017. You may ask, what have we done with all this money that you funded for us? Well, on the next slide, slide 5, this reflects the fiscal year 2016 key milestones that we had anticipated at the beginning of the fiscal year. As you can see, good news story is we have achieved every milestone we set out to achieve in this fiscal year, except for one, which is still underway, but still we anticipate achieving that by fiscal year end. and that is completing these stakeholder engagements, which are continuing and ongoing. So now that we looked at fiscal year 2016 and how we're doing thus far, we'll now move to fiscal year 17, bring you up to current date. And we're looking at, on slide 6, our fiscal year 2017 as well as 2018 priorities. As Jim mentioned, all business units this year were involved in the budget formulation process. This allowed for ultimate collaboration across all business units to make sure that we were aligned and streamlined. As one of the first focuses of the business units and the whole team, we actually looked at and developed fiscal year 17 priorities to make sure that all budgets aligned with these priorities. These focus on mobilization, buy-in, public safety, adoption preparation, as well as network execution. But we didn't focus solely on FY17 priorities. We also, considering our 5-year strategic plan, strategized and looked at our fiscal year 18 priorities as well. And those 18 priorities focused on operations, customer service, and innovation. So with these priorities in mind, on slide 7 is our recommendation for the budget. As Jim mentioned, this actually is comprised of 2 parts. The total budget request is $6.585 billion. The first facet of that amount is for the contract award, which we're setting aside $6.5 billion. The other piece of the total budget is to support FirstNet operations, and that amount is $85 million that we're requesting. As Mike mentioned, we have we're pivoting in a way this year. As you may remember, in previous years, such as in FY16, the work streams were comprised of the acquisition work stream, consultation, and corporate services. This year, as we pivot, we've also adjusted the work streams to better align with our mission and where we're headed. The new work streams are transitioned from acquisition work stream is now network operations. The consultation work stream has been aligned to better focus on our customers, and that work stream is now public safety. We did keep the corporate services work stream this fiscal year. However, we actually broke it out into program operations and administrative operations to make it more transparent as to what true admin operations are subject to that administrative cap of $100 million. So with these work streams in mind, you can see on slide 9 how we plan to utilize the money by quarter as far as obligations are concerned. Our total obligation budget is $84.6 million, and you can see that the blue represents the corporate services work stream, the orange represents public safety, and the green represents network operations. The key to this is that we do have plans to meet our $84.6 million in obligations. And when it comes to obligations, you may ask, what is that? Obligations are basically where we commit. It's beyond committing of the funds. It's actually recording of the funds that we plan to use. Once the obligation occurs, then we begin to expense against those obligations. Which leads me to slide 10, focusing on the fiscal year 17 expense budget request of $118.4 million. The corporate services, public safety, and network operations work streams are represented as they were on the obligations request. And one thing to note is that you may ask why the spike in Q3. We actually are anticipating that our grants that we awarded this fiscal year, that we obligated this fiscal year, will continue to expense, and a majority of those expenses will come in FY17. The next slide represents the fiscal year 17 milestones that we anticipate hitting this fiscal year, and you can see the red star is our network award, contract award. The milestones are broken down by those new work streams I mentioned: network operations, public safety, and corporate services. State plans the portal is anticipated in Q2, and the final state plan to governors is anticipated no later than Q3. With regard to the FirstNet role in all of this, you can see on slide 12 our functional org chart. Two things I'd like to briefly point out on this org chart are two new organizations: the Network Program Office and the Chief Customer Officer. The Network Program Office will work with FirstNet industry partner on the radio access network deployment in states and territories. The Chief Customer Officer will coordinate consultation and state plans, product management, and marketing for future FirstNet network users. Altogether, we believe that these organizations allow FirstNet to be better positioned to partner with our commercial provider and best serve our public safety stakeholders as we build out, operate, and continue to maintain the network. Altogether, before I turn it back over to Jim, I just wanted to close by stating that we feel that this budget that we presented supports network partnership contract award, and it also is supportive of the initiatives that we need to prepare us for our partnership and position us to actually create the network, create that public safety outreach, continue consultation, deliver state plans, and build our technology as we anticipate. Ultimately, positioning us to support our first responders through the use of our network and help them to ultimately save lives. Jim, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Kim, thanks very much. Thank you, Mike, as well. Presentation. And for those of us who are not accustomed to federal budgeting, it may be curious to note at first that our authorizations go down considerably next year and our expenses up. But that's because, as you indicated, we've got that bulge probably in the third quarter of grant payouts that have been authorized during the current fiscal year. So it certainly makes sense, and we appreciate your stewardship of our resources. Well, are there questions of Kim on the budget proposal from committee members or other board members?
Jim, this is Ed Horowitz. I would just, first of all, like to amplify your comments to the team for engaging in really a rigorous development of this budget. I know it's gone through a number of iterations, and I think the description of the pivot that Kim and Mike have, which is shifting us to an award and then a post-award environment is spot on. And if I go back to this chart 5 where you talk about summary of FY 2016 milestones, it really demonstrates a cadence that is really leading up to the ability to issue an award, and then post that with the milestones that are on slide 11 for fiscal 2017, you could see a natural progression of the 2016 cadence and milestones achieved going into the 2017 plan, which then is supported by the budget, both from a new authorization for this year, plus the carryover from last year. So I think that my compliments to the team, and I know that we've had a lot of discussions on it to get to this point, but just wanted to support that.
Thanks, Ed. You're certainly right that it may look like a brief number of slides during the meeting today, but an awful lot of work went into the preparation of the budget.
Hey, Jim, this is Sue. I'd just like to make one comment, and we talked about it as we were in deliberations, but this is a real pivotal year, and it's not going to be business as usual as we expect because of an expected award. And so I think what we agreed, and I just want to validate that we may need to revisit this depending on how things evolve, for the organization. And I think we indicated as a committee and as a board that we certainly would be willing to work with management on any kind of adjustments that needed to be made as the year evolves.
That's a very good point. The text of the resolution that we'll consider will provide some flexibility for management, but it may well require a revisitation by the board. You're right.
Right. So
that's correct.
I just wanted to mention that, and for those listening, it just because this is going to be a very different year for us. But I think we all understand that. But in case it looks like a surprise to people later in the year, we didn't want to surprise people.
Other questions of him?
No, I'm good.
Well, if not, Madam Chairman, I'd like to ask the Finance Committee to consider the resolution that is summarized on slide 13. That would be to adopt a budget of $6.585 billion, including the $84.65 million in operating funds, $6.5 billion for our award and task orders, and then the flexibility that I mentioned where senior leadership may not only enter into the agreements but reallocate up to 10% of the funds as needed and exceed the obligation level by 10% in the aggregate or 15% for any of the three major activity categories, and finally that the funds be apportioned and available at the beginning of the year. So again, some flexibility in this resolution, not unlike what we've authorized in the past. If it's insufficient, then we'll certainly be asking the board to come back together and take another look at it. But that's the essence of the resolution, and I've summarized it, but Karen traditionally asks our secretary to read the resolve clauses, so I'll invite you to do that.
And Jim, can I just ask one thing? Since we're recommending as a finance committee to the board, are we going to do this individually or separate, or together? Are you looking for the finance committee and the board to respond to this resolution kind of as an entire group, or do you want to do it separately?
We should do it separately.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
So this is it. So I'll move it. I don't know if Karen has to read it 2 times, but based on the description that's on slide 13, this is that I would move to the Finance Committee that we forwarded to the board.
And if I may jump in, this is Karen. I agree. Jim has done an excellent job of summarizing the resolution, and so if we want to just move forward without me reading the 3 clauses that we have resolved, we can move forward and vote on the finance resolution number 15, which approves the fiscal year 2017 budget.
I think we're comfortable with that. Is there a second to Ed's motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other questions from the Finance Committee specifically or discussion? If not, all in favor of the committee adopting Resolution 15 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no?
Ayes have it, and the Finance Committee has adopted the resolution and will present it to the board momentarily. We had a second resolution, Madam Chairman, on slide 14 that I'd like the committee to take a look at. This amends and supersedes a resolution that was adopted by the board 4 years ago. And as you and Ed and others have noted, times are changing, and we're in a new era now The resolution adopted in December of 2012 was as FirstNet was starting up and developing some procedures and policies for its expenditures, and it's time to update that. So that's what Resolution 16 for the Finance Committee does. It says that the board may review obligations and expenditures over $10 million and must approve them if they exceed $25 million or if there's more than a 5-year period of performance. It further provides that the board shall approve all leases of real property. It directs the CEO to take whatever actions are necessary to ensure that the funds are promptly apportioned and available for use, and to coordinate with OMB as necessary as well. So the old resolution that isn't on the screen, but I think some board members have seen, had a limitation on how much could be expended by our management without coming back to the board, and we're obviously at a point where we're prepared to be more generous, I guess, in delegating that authority and reserving to the board the more substantial items. But Kim or Mike, any other comments on this resolution?
I have no other comments.
No, you summarized it well.
You know, Jim, I do have a question, and maybe, Mike, it's for you. It just seems to me that while these seem like large numbers in the scheme of what we're going to be doing, there will probably be quite a bit of board involvement as we look at issuing an award and task orders and things like that. I just wanted to get your view on that as you think about this. So it doesn't mean that you're just going to be off doing stuff on your own. We're still going to have the board very involved in what happens over the next year. Is that your view of that?
Absolutely. So as you think about the contract award and then the initial flurry of task orders that we're anticipating, those are significant large dollar events. The day-to-day blocking and tackling of supporting the partnership and with the FirstNet and operations, the board will still be heavily involved in the Finance Committee going forward on a monthly and quarterly basis. This just gives us the flexibility to be as quick and as nimble as industry and ourselves require.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, Jim, because I wanted to make sure, particularly for the board who hasn't been as involved in the Finance Committee work, to know that they will still be able to have a finger on the pulse, as far as management's activity.
And I might add that Kim presents a monthly update to the Finance Committee on how we're tracking our budget, and she and I talk much more frequently than that. So if there are any extraordinary issues or questions that come up, we'll certainly alert the board as appropriate.
And if I may jump in at this point and just, I guess, since Jim, again, you've done a great job of summarizing. We are now about to vote on the Finance Committee Resolution number 16. As you mentioned, it allows the CEO to make all reasonable and appropriate expenditures with those caveats of the board will be notified and review any expenditure over $10 million, will approve anything that exceeds $25 million or a 5-year period of performance, and all real property leases. I'm ready to have the Madam Chair call for a vote. I'm sorry, have Jim call for a vote.
Jim, I think it's Jim.
Yeah, is there a motion from the Finance Committee to approve this resolution?
So moved.
A second.
Moved and seconded to adopt Resolution 16, which supersedes and restates Board Resolution 14. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor of adopting it, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the committee has adopted the resolution. Well, I think that concludes the business of the Finance Committee. Madam Chairman, we'll turn it back to you.
Great. And Karen and Mike, I was just trying to clarify, now we need to take this to the board, correct?
Yes, and we also have minutes to approve.
Right. No, I understand that. I was going to finish this work first and then go back to my oversight on the minutes after this was the most important thing to get done. But
Yes.
essentially, we have the same resolutions in front of the board for consideration and a vote. Is that correct?
Yes, we can. If you'd like, we could start with Board Resolution 77, which here the Finance Committee Resolution 15, and it approves the fiscal year 2017 budget. The language is identical. It just calls for the board to approve.
Great. So I just want to open it up to the rest of the board. You've seen the material. Tried to obviously give you a summary of that, but based on what the Finance Committee has done, do the board members who are not part of the committee have any questions or comments about the FY17 budget?
So this is Terry, can I just ask one procedural question?
Sure.
And
sure.
I should remember this from having been through it. Does the budget then get submitted through NTIA to Department of Commerce, or how is the budget actually finally submitted? Just from an organizational perspective.
Hi, Terry. This is Kim Farrington. The way this works is the board will hopefully approve of this budget. Then we provide the overall figures to NTIA, who provides those numbers up through Commerce to OMB for apportionment. So as soon as OMB apportions the funds, which they have graciously advised us that they'll work with us to get these in place before the fiscal year begins, OMB will apportion for us, but because of the nature of the apportionment process, it will go through NTIA and Commerce. I have briefed both NTIA and the departments on the budget that we're seeing today and answered all of their questions.
Okay, so we don't expect, there's not another approval process somewhere.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, the board with these resolutions is basically the final answer before the apportionment requests go to OMB.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no, good question, Terry. And, Kim, I think, has done, just as we've had through the history of us, I think a very good interaction with the appropriate agencies to make sure it wasn't a surprise. And so I think this is, just really the final part of the process. But I appreciate the question for those who may have had the same question. Any other questions, observations from the rest of the board? If not, I would welcome a motion to approve Board Resolution 77, which is the FY17 budget.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition or abstentions? We have approval of Board Resolution 77, Karen. And now we have Board Resolution 78, which is the amendment and restatement of Resolution 14, which Jim just went over regarding the review of obligations and expenditures, for management and approval of property leases, which is an adjustment from a previous approval level. Any questions or comments about this resolution? Hearing none, I'd welcome a motion to approve Resolution 78.
I don't move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Thank you. Then those in favor of Resolution 78, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or objections? Thank you. That has passed, Karen, and I'm sure you'll make these available for public consumption after the board meeting. Since I didn't indicate that we would take a moment at the beginning of the meeting to approve the minutes, we have two sets of minutes from our meetings in Chicago. And Karen, what I'd like to do, and just make sure you have agreement, since we were really combined, I'd like to take them separately, have the committees in total take a look at the combined minutes versus doing them all separately.
I think that is a great idea, Sue. There are two minor changes that I'd like to just add before we vote. I did have to correct and add James Douglas to the board minutes on 6:30. He was inadvertently left off the roll call. And there was a slight word change in the Governance and Personnel Committee and the sentence, one of the sentences on page 5, but it did not affect the meaning or the content of the sentence.
Well, I'm glad that we included Mr. Douglas because I vividly remember him being in the car. Okay. Oh, Jim.
I was memorable, obviously.
Yeah. So having said that, we'll take the committee minutes first. And so, if there's are there any comments or suggestions on those minutes? And we'll take these in totality. So we'll almost vote them, Karen, like a board, if you're okay with that.
That is fine.
Okay, so taking those minutes that are a combined set of the minutes for the committees, are there any comments, suggestions, corrections that you'd like to note? And I do believe, Karen, we have a quorum for all committees, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam Chair, we do.
Great. So I'd entertain a motion to approve that set of minutes for the committees from Chicago.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, same sign. Those are approved. Karen, I'm sure you'll make those available. And then we have a set of minutes for the actual board meeting, and I would entertain a motion to approve those as well.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions or objections? Karen, those are approved as well. So thank you for that. Mike, I think you have just a quick update that you would like to update the board on, just in terms of things that are going on. I know you and the team have been extremely busy, not only with consultation, but just the RFP update. So the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. And, myself and the entire FirstNet staff, we want to congratulate and thank the board members, you, Sue, Jeff, Terry, and Barry for staying on with us. And in fact, the entire board. You all, as you know, don't just show up every, 2 or 3 months and weigh in. You're very active board, as alluded to earlier with Governor Douglas talking to Kim on quite a few occasions to help us along. And thanks to the entire board for approving the FY17 operating budget. The team worked very hard. TJ and Kim really herded all the cats into a successful outcome that we're extremely pleased and happy for. So what we're going to be doing next is obviously, as we look towards 17, we can't forget about 16, so we're going to be finishing strong for FY16 with the activities and tasks that are still underway, and start pre-positioning FY17 with the budget and the organization. I'm absolutely confident we have the people and the resources needed to embark on this and start up as a national public safety broadband network. One of the things, as significant events still underway, the RFP evaluation, we are still working feverishly away at that, and we are still targeting an award in the November timeframe. There's lots of work to do to make sure that we have a solution that's going to make sense, and that it's a win for public safety, a win for our states and agencies, and a win for our industry partner, and certainly a win for FirstNet and the federal government. So we continue to work feverishly on that. Once we do have a line of sight for an award, we will be asking the board to reconvene. Our next scheduled board meeting is December 13th and 14th in Sacramento, but I anticipate probably in the early November time frame to ask the board to come together to deliberate and weigh in on a recommendation from staff as to an award for this partnership. Obviously, there's a lot of dependencies on finalizing our evaluations and coming to those conclusions. But we want to thank everyone. We want to thank all the people that have supported FirstNet up to this point. And Sue, as you started the meeting, FY17 is going to be, very exciting year, and we really appreciate the board's assistance and work over the last year, and we look forward to the coming year. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you. This is an opportunity for the board to ask any questions of Mike or the management team. As Mike said, we're very involved, many of us on a pretty frequent basis, particularly now, even more so than before. But if there's anything on anybody's mind, this is certainly an opportunity to ask Mike or the rest of the team who are present any questions or make any comments. Hearing none, we are well within our appointed time here. Again, thank you, Mike and team. Obviously this has been quite the journey. It's exciting to be at this stage. I'm excited to have a budget ahead of us. I also want to take the opportunity to thank all of the folks that support us beyond FirstNet inside. Obviously, the organization within the federal government. As you know, we get a lot of support from our colleagues at NTIA, Larry Strickling's staff, and they've been quite instrumental in helping us through a number of issues that we needed to deal with, and also with the folks at the Department of Commerce. And Mike, I know that you interact and your team interacts with them on an ongoing basis, but it's very important that people understand that we get quite a bit of support from our colleagues in that organization. I don't know if you have any particular comments about that, Mike.
No, absolutely. And, the entire organization, Commerce, NTIA, Department of Interior, who's our partner on the acquisition, everyone has been working very hard on behalf of FirstNet. So we are deeply appreciative for their help. They've removed and help us move any challenges or obstacles that may pop up as we continue to move forward. So that's enough.
Right, and thanks for remembering Department of Interior. I know that they're, toiling away, and I don't have as much visibility for obvious reasons to that organization, so I appreciate you mentioning them as well. If that covers everything, Mike, anything else from the rest of your team today?
No, I think we're in great shape. Thank you again for the vote. Okay,
great. And unless there's anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee and the Board Committee.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I don't imagine any opposition or abstentions, and therefore the meeting is closed. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and back to work. Thanks, everybody.